Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to an all-new episode of Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you, live. My name is VashSky, your host today, and of course, the amazing, the one, the only, the reason why we are all here and covering this crazy world of the Hollywood and entertainment industry is the amazing Lou Wasserman's Ghost. Right over here.
Makes me feel like a stage magician, you know? The amazing Lou Wasserman's Ghost presents the milk container escape, or the Chinese linking rings, or whatever.
Well, I'm not as creative as
and Vash, with all due respect to your visage and form, you ain't exactly a magician's bimbo in tights, you know. So if you're gonna give me all that build up, I need a few assistants to help me with a little escape trick backstage. Anyway,
speaking of magician's assistants. And all of that, we're actually going to be talking a little bit of that when going over the history of MGM today. Because, well, you got to incorporate Vegas in the coverage of MGM as much as you do the old Backlot and everything else. So should be a whole lot of fun to go over. Before we get to that, Lou, well, we got to talk about a little bit of what's going on today. Just to start us off here, I saw this story. I thought it was very interesting. I know we're not a contemporary channel, but I just thought this was fascinating. Discussing film, Joker 2 earns $40 million in the film's domestic opening run, almost 3 times lower than the first film's opening weekend, lower than the opening weekends of The Flash and The Marvels, almost the same as Morbius. Budget was $200 million. It is now the lowest reviewed comic book movie ever, and the worst word of mouth ever seen for a production like this. Lou, your thoughts?
Let's put it this way in terms of MGM. Phoenix and Gaga will never be Fred and Ginger. So why they made this a musical, I do not know. Anyway, I have totally no interest in it personally. So
Same.
A disaster, a shocker. Look at this person. Luis Fernando hit the worst WOM ever received by a CBM. WXYZ, WQ. Well, it's like, God, way back when I had a friend, actually a husband of a high school chum of my mom's, who was a big deal at the PR division of Universal. And he explained to me that when they were making Jaws, they liked Steven and they trusted him and they thought it was going to be big. But then they started hitting all the overruns that they ran into, because let me tell you something, shooting on the water is not easy. Mainly Agreed. Because no matter the era or the technology, your boat moves one way and the star boat moves the other way and the tide goes the other way. It's real hard to get things in 1 or 2 or 12 or 20 takes. Anyway, they were worried. So they thought, well, let's hedge our bets and do some PR on the making of. And they revealed to the world every little detail about Bruce the Mechanical Shark, which was a fascinating story. And especially in those days when there wasn't as much media about the media, it went over big. But I guarantee you, as scary as that movie was, if you hadn't known for sure that it was a bunch of hoses and rubber and plastic, it would have scared you more. Sometimes too much behind the scenes takes over the image and the message of the movie. And I think that's what happens with these, when there's so much coverage of, well, it opened bigger than a movie with somebody with this middle name in it ever opened on a Tuesday in March when the sun was shining. There's the level of qualifying these triumphs or disasters gets a little obsessive. My basic thing is it any good? Did you have fun for your however many dollars and a couple hours of your time? And how was the popcorn and onwards? But that isn't the world we live in anymore. So, well, I do. I'm still here, by God.
Well, and we are thankful for that, because I think I do think people need a little bit of dose of reality. I suppose when you're covering the box office for certain films, when you have something sensational like that, it makes sense when you would frame it as such. But I just think it's absolutely fascinating to have a movie like that made over $1 billion, was renowned, especially by a certain group of individuals, for the accomplishments within that film, and then the sequel come out and not do well at all.
Which goes to show you that not everything should have a sequel.
There you go.
So, everybody's in search of the great white franchise instead of the great white whale. And sometimes a one-off is all there is there, and thank God it was good. Next. But that's the mentality. Because let's face it, the bottom line on sequels is, if I can get a sequel out of it, I don't have to come up with a new idea. And more importantly, don't have to come up with a risk. That's what new ideas are. They're risks. So,
yeah, they're huge, massive risks. That's for sure. But it's also risky, starting your own film studio. That's a pretty risky endeavor, especially back in the 1920s, 1930s, which
20s.
is where our story of MGM actually begins there. Now, MGM comes from the name Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and it's a combination of about 3 companies.
Actually, 5. There were 2 that didn't get into the name. What was
really?
It? Oh yeah. They put up a whole bunch of stuff together, because the whole theory was that although you had all these people producing different kinds of things, if the studio itself was one entity, you only had to have maybe only 1 or maybe 2 lots, and maybe only 1 set of accountants and 1 set of office people, and all the basic infrastructure could be more cheaply shared amongst those. And that turned out not to be true. They went broke, but it took them a while.
Well,
I mean, you had the studio, first of all, which was huge. Basically 3 miles of land in the middle of Culver City, with 14 sound stages and 45 buildings, and 3 different back lots, a front lot, a side lot, a building. But just because you had all that didn't mean the stories were all worthy of it. So
yeah,
that's they keep thinking that the trappings are the content, and they're not. But again, that's the way it was.
this was a huge backlot, by the way, guys. 165 acres, the largest, I think, in Hollywood.
Oh yeah. Well, let's see. Yeah, technically, I guess so. If you put all the lots together, Universal had a big piece of property. They were even technically, designated Universal City, but it was all one clump, as opposed to MGM, which was the 3 major big lots, and one of which started as what they used to call the 40 acres, because that's what they began with, and then
gotcha.
Of course, the reason why all of this was possible is that the studios were out on the fringes of the town in those days. If this was what it is now, prime real estate in the middle of the city, you couldn't afford to dedicate it to a backlot. You just couldn't. It would become literally cheaper to take a whole movie company and go to India than to build it on the backlot. But in those days, the alternative was true. So it's all about the times. In other words, all I'm trying to say is, to compare, you can compare this to now, but you're comparing apples and oranges as far as the overall economy is concerned.
All the elements that make up the story are so much different than something set in contemporary
even simple
times.
things like the cost of traveling on location,
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, even like camera equipment, you'd take that out on location. It's a much different prospect than doing it today.
Well, I think I mentioned about 2 or 3 shows ago, there was a recent situation, very recent, where one of the West African countries, and I forget which one, or I would mention it, offered a movie a deal, which was, we'll let you come here and shoot, and we'll get everything for you for nothing. But you got to bring the full kit of equipment from Europe or Hollywood and leave it here when you go home. So that they suddenly had an infrastructure where they had none before, of cameras and cranes and, all those kinds of basic tools of the biz. So people are being creative, but still doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, if it's Joker 2, it's going to flop. No matter where you shot it.
It doesn't matter where you shot that. It's probably gonna flop with that story and those ideas put together on celluloid. So
I haven't seen it, but I understand he doesn't even become the Joker till the very end, right?
I don't know, actually.
That's what I hear.
Spoiler there. Ooh, that's not good. I don't know what's going on there, but MGM though, you start out with Marcus Lowe from Metro Pictures, right? Which
understand, Lowe's was a vaudeville chain, was a theater chain. In other words, it started on the exhibition side. And when they started saying, hey, we got all these theaters, why don't we make some movies to put in them? Is when they got in the movie business.
Gotcha.
Which is similar. RKO stands for Radio Keith Orpheum. Well, Keith Orpheum was one of the two top circuits in vaudeville of a couple hundred theaters. And when they started buying radio stations in the various towns where they had big theaters, they added the R. And that's why the RKO logo is that globe with the antenna on it going, So all of this, in other words, none of this happened with the movies. It started with live theater, and as movies started to supersede it, just the way that, frankly, in full circle, well, not circle, but in the same kind of transmogrification, MGM today is part of Amazon. It's now the online world. So anyway.
Right. Well, Lowe's, the movie theater chain, would eventually, they would
no, not even movie theaters. I mean, they really were in live theater in vaudeville.
Right.
So anyway.
They would. I suppose they would not transition, but they would get into the theater auditorium or exhibition game and make up a studio in order to release those pictures in it. And I guess
to supply themselves with exclusive content.
Exactly. So for a couple of other interested parties, that could be a big asset and one.
Well, that's why the others came in, because it gave them an automatic distribution for their movies. It's the what was the commercial about? You got peanut butter in my chocolate, and you got chocolate in my peanut butter.
Right.
It's literally that.
And then you have Louis B. Mayer and Samuel at first Goldfish, is that right? And then he changes it.
Shmuel Goldfish, that's right. But that was his name.
That was his name.
Yeah.
The win came from, I guess, like the Selwyn brothers, who used to be part of.
And then you had, a bunch of other companies got involved in this deal. And again, their whole reason was, I've got something you want, you've got something I want, we can do it all together cheaper. Surprise. Right. So
but Goldwyn, the Goldwyn production company, that has the lion logo that everybody
right.
Is synonymous.
Well, they took the best parts. I mean, it says Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, but Mayer wasn't really the boss. Mm-hmm. Lowe's was. And anyway, in fact, they fired him eventually in the 50s. He came. Mayer came from Canada, from New Brunswick, when he was 2 years old. And in fact, there's a funny story. Trying to think who it was. Walter Pidgeon was also from the same town in New Brunswick, but they didn't know that. And Pidgeon was called in. They wanted to sign him as an actor, and he was called in. Everybody had to meet Louis B. and get the stamp of approval from the boss. And he told the story about he got called in, and Mayer's talking to him, and he asks him where he's from. And he tells him he's from this little town in New Brunswick, Canada. And Mayer got mad. He thought somebody put him up to it and told him to say that town, knowing that Mayer came from there, and you know, trying and curry favor with him. St. John, that's the name of the town. And when he found out he really did, suddenly he was his favorite guy. But at the beginning, he was ready to kick him out as a fraud, thinking somebody told him that. So anyway.
Holy smokes. Well,
yeah. So.
Oh, man. I guess when you have multiple people at the top, it gets interesting really fast, especially when it comes to negotiating deals and so forth. I suppose, I mean, this was a very prolific time for MGM, probably the most prolific in their history, the era of the 1930s, 1950s, around there loosely. One of the productions that they're most known for now is Wizard of Oz. However, not super successful in the era that it was released.
No, but it was one of 50 movies they put out that year.
Exactly.
So,
which is crazy.
Well,
you were saying
it's funny because it replicates in the later history of the company. I happened to attend the press opening of the second MGM hotel in Las Vegas. You know, the first one is now Bally's. But when they opened the one that is still now the MGM, that was when they built a theme park at the back of it. And the press asked them, well, what's with the theme park? Are you trying to say Vegas is a family town? It's not. It's about, you know, drinking and gambling and hookering and all that kind of stuff. And what the guy said was, look, he says, we consider whatever gets people in here to be something we should do. He says, if you come to see Lou Rawls in the main room, great, but you're going to drop a nickel in the slot machine as you walk by. And if you came for the theme park, great, but you're going to do that. And if you came for the great gourmet chefs we have, you know, it's one more piece of the puzzle where we can get you into our brand. So, you know, I mean,
well, yeah, and there were a lot of developments in the amusement space around this time because the baby boomers were having kids of their own, so you had this new proliferation of
it was the roaring 20s, as they call them. It was the post it was because the economy was going crazy. It was everything leading up to the Depression and World War II and all that. But well, think about it. It's 1924. It's 100 years. And Disney and I think Paramount was 23. All these companies, you know, they all were starting up at that same time.
Sure.
So
absolutely.
And what it was, frankly, was as the economy expanded and as the technology of the economy expanded, which meant, yes, there was automation, not like we talk about it now, but there was. And therefore, people had more leisure time. They weren't working a 60 or 70-hour week. Right. And if that reduced itself by, anyway.
Right. That's a very good point. And around the time of the Depression, right, going into almost World War II, or at least the U.S.'s involvement of it, we have a beautiful picture in the form of Wizard of Oz, like we said before, not like unbelievably successful because, well, the same year you had something come out from MGM as well in a kind of shared deal, this being Gone with the Wind. Unbelievably successful picture, but there's some history regarding that and how MGM got involved. Is that right?
Which history? I mean, first of all, remember, it was a huge book. Yeah. It was the ultimate bestseller of bestsellers, and not intentionally for this reason, but I think because even within a United States of America, the two sides were still in people's hearts, depending on where they lived. And this movie about the South in the Civil War also it played both sides of the game, if you see what I mean. In other words, if you were a Yankee or you were a Southerner, either way, you could enjoy this movie and the characters. And that was the genius of the book, I believe. And from there came the movie. But it was this movie, I tell you. Of course, it was Selznick's.
Selznick.
And Selznick was not the mayor, but he was right next door, and there were some romantic entanglements amongst the families. And in fact, when I explained, I guess it was 3 episodes ago, about contracts and loan outs and like that, basically, there's a picture somewhere. Let's see. Have you got which one is it? I guess it's at the top of wait a minute. No, I pulled up a few articles. Oh yeah, this one on Microsoft, whatever. And it shows the publicity picture of Gable signing the contract. But it's not really Gable signing it. It's Louis B. Mayer signing Gable away to Selznick. Here, wait a minute. I'll give you the link. You can scroll down.
Please.
Let's see.
You got it. I'd love to see that, because apparently, Selznick picked up the rights. I believe they bought the rights for $50,000 at that point.
Right.
And who was it who wanted Gable in that production? Was it Selznick or was
everybody?
It the director?
Everybody.
Because
when they announced that the book, which was again the bestseller of all bestsellers at that time, was going to be made into a movie, the entire world of fandom said, "Well, it's got to be Gable as Red." There was a big dispute over who was going to be Scarlet, but go to that link I sent you and go down about halfway, and you'll see the shot of Louis B. and Selznick standing over him and Clark, and they're supposedly signing away the deal. But
gotcha.
Anyway,
let me see here. Let me see.
After that newspaper clipping of Ben-Hur, the original, and then there's the shot of the Thalberg building, and anyway, a lot of good stuff in there.
There is a lot of good stuff in here. Oh my goodness gracious. Well, that is some good stuff. Okay, this one, right? Gotcha. Yep, that would be
that's the one. That's the one. Louis B. on the right, Clark on the left, and Selznick above them both there.
Right. And for Clark Gable's services, MGM would then be able to distribute the picture. Is that right? And then share 50% of the profits.
Well, sure. Because remember, all these independent producers, they didn't have the theaters. They had to make a distribution deal with the majors that had the theaters.
Right.
Which was the theaters what Lowe brought to the party of making MGM. So anyway,
this goes on to make unbelievable amounts at the box office.
Oh yeah.
Adjusted for inflation, is still the highest grossing picture of all time. I mean, it is a monumental success in ways that really helped fund Selznick for sure, but also MGM and fuel their creative outgrowth at around this time. But
remember, Selznick was basically a one picture at a time kind of guy.
Right.
He didn't have a slate of 50 going on at once, various stages of production. On the other hand, what he did have was a very high actor overhead, because he would see people in the theater who were unknown and think they were good for the movies and sign them to a personal contract, even if he didn't have a part for them or a movie going on.
Oh, really?
So that got to be a little bit of an overhead issue, not like owning a piece of real estate like a studio with a huge payroll, but still, it was, even for an as yet nobody, paying them whatever it was a week, 52 weeks a year, probably would have equated the grip department at MGM, so.
Huh. Well, yeah, that doesn't seem like except
that they did, because if he saw, remember, Joe Actor is under contract to Selznick, and Selznick thinks he's going to be a star if he gets the right parts, and he hears, because he's connected, that Louis B. there is making a movie that has a part in it that would show this guy off. He makes Louis B. a deal that A, basically covers his personal obligation to the contract with the star, and B, helps improve his value to him as a star for one of his own pictures down the road. So this was if all of this sounds familiar, this contracting and purchasing of the rights to people, it was called slavery back in the old days.
No, it's absolutely it's true. Um, it's pretty accurate. I mean, I kind of look at it almost like sports teams and how they have
Well, yeah,
obviously
very,
players on
very
contract
similar.
and all that. Yeah. But yeah, having a bunch of people essentially on retainer or on hold. Yeah, unless you are leveraging them that way, that could get very costly very quickly. But
I see an interesting question. They're talking about Wizard of Oz in the
oh
chat,
yes,
and about we know that Buddy Ebsen was the original Tin Man, but he was very, very allergic to that silver makeup and got sick
yes,
and was out of the picture. And Stuttering Guitarist, one of our friends, says, "Is it true that Buddy Ebsen's voice is still in the movie during some of the musical numbers before he got sick due to makeup?" I do not believe so, because his dancing style is so very, very different than uh, uh, like Jack Haley. I don't think there's much of him in it, if any. Maybe some long, long shots. So
yeah,
uh,
which
both
is not
Don CK, they own theaters, and they didn't exactly rent the theater. They had ongoing deals. This is where the whole, which we've talked about before, but I'll recap it briefly. The
please.
whole block booking issue of the antitrust stuff that came along that broke up the
Right.
studios.
We were just about to hit that, but please go ahead, kick us off.
Well, you've heard the term, I'm sure. Indeed, based on income, the new sequel to Joker is one, B Pictures. A B picture is a lower budget, lower level of stars. One thing a lot of B pictures did was reuse the expensive fancy sets that were built for the A pictures. For example, it is a little known fact. You know all the Three Stooges shorts. And it seems like those pie fights are always happening in these fantastically elegant mansions with
That's
beautiful
true.
columns and draperies and people. Well, why did they have a set like that? Literally, the producers, the writers for the Stooges would walk around the lot once a week and see what set was about to be done from a big luxury musical that they were making at Columbia at the time and say, hey, don't tear it down. Monday morning after you're done on Saturday night, we'll go in there and tear it up and make a movie. So suddenly the set budget for what would have been an expensive little comedy is zero because they were going to tear it down anyway. Might as well do it with pies instead of sledgehammers. So the deal was that the theaters they didn't own, they would say, hey, do you want to show the next Clark Gable movie in your town theater rather than the guy across the street who's against you? Great. Right. Sign here. And you can also show the 3 of these stinkers we've got. They didn't call them that, but that's how it worked. And that was called block booking, that if you wanted the big movies, you had to take the little ones too. And the government eventually decided that was not kosher. So
yeah, we can get into that a little bit because I think it's very important to MGM's story here, because in 1948, the famous United States versus Paramount Pictures case, in which you had these huge verticals, you had huge studios who owned essentially distribution, exhibition, and production. I'm sorry, yeah, and it was
for
like,
those the one of those that's always confusing to people,
please,
is distribution.
Right.
You know what exhibition is? That's the movie theater. You know what production is? That's the studio.
Right.
But there's a whole other level of bureaucracy and income in distribution. Literally getting the movies out, the prints, the physical stuff.
Right.
Most major towns in this country had a thing called the Motion Picture Exchange downtown. And it was all the studios were partners in it, or 2 or 3 at a time in one and 2 or 3 at a time in another one. It's basically a very, very polished movies only UPS or FedEx. It's a warehouse, and it's established deals with railroad companies, shipping companies, whatever, to get those pictures to the place they needed to be seen. And when that print is done in Cleveland, it moves on to Chicago and moves on to so-and-so. All of that stuff. And that's where the money was. Because the theater is paying the percentage of the receipts or whatever the deal is to the distributor to give him the movie. He's not sending it all the way back directly to MGM. Well, why is that dicey? Aside from the compulsion, the basically leverage, blackmail, whatever you want to call it, to get Jan Monroe, it's not really the same thing, but we'll get to that in a second. Not only are they being compelled to take those ones that they might otherwise not have wanted or not make as much money on, every step of the way, the money is changing hands, which means it may have made a profit for the distributor, but a loss for the studio, because by the time the distributor takes their cut off the top, it's the same company, you understand. It's different divisions of the same company.
Exactly.
It's like we talked about a few weeks ago, I think, for home video in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. You know, if a picture was produced by Paramount Pictures and the distribution on VHS was Paramount Home Video, well, isn't that all the same people? Maybe, but each one is taking its own profit and loss, and it's pretty easy to cook the books when there's that many people with the same reason to do business, doing business.
Right.
But cross promotion, it doesn't come close to it. It was a racket. It was a racket, pure and simple.
So for Disney, that's where you have Buena Vista Distribution. That's the distribution arm of the Walt Disney Company.
Well, yeah, right.
Ahead,
and in case you're wondering, Buena Vista Street is the street that Disney Studios is on.
There you go.
So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
The one that separates the studio from the hospital across the street where Walt died.
Mm.
So, Buena Vista's right at the heart of everything they do. So,
but under such an accounting structure, you could theoretically, because these actors, at least in the modern era, are contracted with the studio for that specific production. Well, you can keep that accounting separately from the distribution.
That's all those company names that we see in the English filings for the tax deals.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, you know. Well, or MGM signs Clark Gable to 3-picture deal. So is he making a deal with the studio? And then when they get to the individual picture, does it have its own set of books? And does MGM, the studio that owns XYZ Productions, that owns the great Clark, the picture, do each of those people pay to each other to get around to getting Clark a check this week? Gets a little messy.
It gets a little messy.
I've told this story, I'm pretty sure, on here, but let me just tell it again.
Please.
When Easy Rider came out, which was the biggest picture at the box office ever when it came out.
Huge.
And the previous champ, I think it was 4 or 5 years earlier, was The Sound of Music. Now, The Sound of Music was a huge, luxurious 20th Century Fox massive movie that was made for the then whopping sum of $4.5 million. Easy Rider was made for about $950,000. And so people were in shock that a little movie could overcome the results of a big movie. Both those numbers being a pittance in today's money, but then that was a whole, what year did that just say? I forget that Easy Rider.
1969. So
there you go.
It came out.
So the joke, question, and answer in the biz at that time was as follows. Does this mean that major studios will start making movies for under $1 million? Answer, no. You can't steal $1 million out of $1 million.
It's so true.
So true. When you hear about all these Hollywood accounting and monkey points and all the rest of that, there's so many places to hide money and play with budgets. But then it doesn't just go for the producers. We were crying for the poor little movie theater over block booking. I have seen and I'm talking 60s, 70s, contemporary reports coming in of box office from the theaters, because of course the theaters don't literally take the money from the cash box up front, put it in an envelope, and send it off to Hollywood. There's a certain amount of time lag, which means basically you're borrowing the studio's money for free until you have to give them their piece. And they know that. I have seen those reports for 4th of July weekend that say theater closed due to rain damage.
That's insane.
And you can go look it up, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky that day. So one of the ways, by the way, that digital projection has changed all of that.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to the movies now, probably 80, 90%, I don't know what percent, but 80 or 90% of it is never on film. It's all digital.
Yeah.
And that was touted as well. It'll be, it's so many K, and it'll be sharper and clearer and better sound. And yeah, right. True. But if you think that instead of, like with those old exchanges, the equivalent of UPS carrying a can full of film is happening, it's not. But if you think that those theaters with their super duper digital projectors are basically getting a hard drive delivered or downloading a hard drive's worth of stuff to the projector so it can show the digital movie, you're wrong. Because let me tell you what's on top of every one of those theaters: a satellite dish. And guess what? When it comes to, if you go to the 8 o'clock show tonight at your local theater of, I don't know, Joker, about 5 minutes to 8, that projector goes up the wire into the sky and says, "Hi, satellite, can I show the movie?" And it says, "Wait a minute, let me check." And it says, "Oh, wait, this is the Acme Bijou Theater in Sandusky, Ohio, right? Yeah. The one at the corner of First and Broadway? Yeah. The one that owes us $800,000 and hasn't paid in 3 months? Yeah. Sorry, no movie for you." It literally has to unlock every single showing. And it doesn't do that until it checks how long you're floating their money for. So it's obviously worth it to do that if you can get away with it. So,
but this
now there's a hell of this may be the best chat question we've ever gotten. Look at Jan Monroe's.
Craft services, the food, yes. Or is it the? Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Jan, my answer is it all depends. How do you like your hookers? Medium or well done? Let YouTube make sense out of that one. Anyway, but there isn't a single guy named Adolf in that question, so we're safe. Anyway,
digital though also has a bunch of ancillary benefits. Not only that, though, from what I have heard and understand, there are digital signatures, let's say, that are embedded in every single film, and that can be tracked to the theaters themselves that exhibit those prints there. And let's say you have let's say your theater isn't watching for say high seas activity. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Well, if it is found that your prints from your theater keep popping up as being problematic, the distributors can actually go to those theaters and say, "Hey, you're not keeping a tap on high seas activity, actually coming from your theaters, because we have a series of prints that we can track back to you." So it's
digital watermark.
Very interesting.
But in fact, I remember years ago, and it's got to be because it's when I was at SC, talking with Taylor Hackford and about his film Ray, about Ray Charles, and about how the day the movie opened, they got a print with a digital watermark in it that said to them which movie theater it had been copied from. In other words, they sent out the movie digitally, and already there were black market copies being sold, and he could tell this was stolen from the XYZ theater in Brooklyn or whatever, because that watermark is in the image, even if you shoot it with a camera from the audience, which was being done.
Yep.
So,
man, I have heard something similar. It is real fascinating how all that comes back and everything there. But I do miss the real days where what is it? I think the first Star Trek, because it was so behind schedule. I mean, literally, exhibitors had versions of that print that were still wet because they had just been printed. They had just gone out to.
Literally, no.
Oh no!
That is an expression in the biz. A wet print, meaning it's one that just barely made it on time. But no, you would not be able to see that after about 2 runs if it was really that wet. So
right. Well, it's just crazy to see that that exchange that happens now between obviously the production company, distributor, and the exhibitor. But all of that was made possible by that United States versus Paramount case. There also didn't have any bearing outside of the United States, so
because it never went to court.
It didn't.
They settled it. They made the deal.
Oh,
and let's not forget that that's the fate of 99% of all cases that are filed or threatened.
Sure.
What was that case? Somebody was. Oh, that thing the other day where the woman and her kid were dragged out of Disney World for sneaking in, and it was on video of her being dragged through, and she said, "Well, I'm investigating legal representation." Well, anybody here a fan like I am of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? And do you remember the scene where Tuco, Eli Wallach, goes into the place to get a gun, and he tries this cylinder with this barrel with this handle, puts a gun together, and he's in the bathtub, and a bad guy who wants to kill him shows up and says, "Ah, there you are at last. I've caught you after all this time, and now I'm gonna bang." He's got the gun in the tub with him, and he shoots him. And his line, they cut to him, and he says, "If you're going to shoot somebody, don't talk about it. Shoot him." And he's killed the guy. Well, all these people threatening legal action. I mean, all you ambulance chasers out there. Here I am. Come make me a deal for a contingency fight, because I have no money to hire you, and you have no money to fight it, and we're all going to rattle sabers at each other. So, anyway.
Well, that is, oh man, certainly extremely interesting. But following the United States versus Paramount Pictures court case that separated, and I think you've described this as well, Lou, where the theaters the production companies have to lose one of those 3 stools there, right? So you can either lose production, can't lose production, you got to make the pictures. You can either lose distribution. Well, I can't lose distribution because, well, we went over the very good reasons. Yeah. Exactly. Or you can lose exhibition, and that's the one they cut off there.
And at that point, they said, "Wait a minute, we can't make all these B pictures if we don't have guaranteed audience for them." And they didn't mean the audience; they meant the theaters. So that's when they said, "I know what we'll do. We'll make fewer movies." And then they said, "But the reason we were making all those movies is because we had everybody from the janitor to the star on a 50 weeks out of the year with 2 weeks for vacation contract. We can't do that anymore. I know, we'll get smarter. We'll only pay them for the picture." To which point the guys like my face there, in fact, literally the guy like my face there, said, "Okay, fine, we'll just pay us per picture. But it's going to be a whole hell of a lot more per picture than it was per week." And got Jimmy Stewart the very first per picture deal like that. So anyway,
huge.
And let's see. Somebody said something here about let me see. There was how many items? Yeah, you can hide anything, that's for sure. But And then when it says, I have an in-law that needs a job, phony title, or what? Sure. Well, I will not tell you who because it's still within recent memory. But a very, very talented, very, very brilliant, wonderful guy who happens to be an extremely prolific sitcom maker in the golden era had his brother on the payroll as an executive producer. The brother was there all the time because he felt an obligation to show up, but knew so little about production that one night when I happened to be on the set, show was done, audience has been sent home, but we're still shooting pickups, the sitcom version of reshoots, but the same night at least, so the same price. And this brother, sweet man, totally without any clue, turned to me and said, "Haven't they got half an hour's worth yet?" Haven't they got half an hour's worth yet of film to make an episode? Like we were shooting. I say I lost you there for a second, but that guy was making. I think he was making $30,000 a week.
What?
For those 26 weeks that the show shot. Yeah.
Haven't they gotten 30 minutes yet? Yeah. Oh man, because I was so in. I wasn't thinking that he was referring to
and the entire production and it still made money.
Goodness gracious! I mean, that's really something right there. I've heard of the let's see, the nepotism, right, or the nepo babies that proliferate Hollywood, but I've never heard of it that bad. I suppose.
Well, if you'll look over in the secret window we have between each other, you'll see who.
Oh, okay. Let me figure. Oh.
Okay. So there you go.
Okay.
And and understand, as you'll see from the prominence of the person involved, he had enough money to give his brother that directly. But why do that if the studio will do it for you? Hey,
That's wild. Oh man.
Anyway,
well, I suppose we had to go into the next era of MGM because following that whole court case right there, some studios were able to manage, not easily, but they were able to get by. MGM, I think, were more susceptible to that than maybe they initially realized, and that made them in turn susceptible to a buyout or somebody coming in and, well, we have to go to Kirk Kerkorian, famous aviator, pilot turned real estate mogul turned, I don't know, studio
billionaire.
Yeah, purchaser. This is an interesting guy, and he is very, very important to this whole story right here. Kirk Kerkorian, like I said, he started out in aviation, flying around the country and so forth in the very early days there. Then gets involved in real estate, Vegas specifically, and I believe he makes a bunch of money buying land that would eventually be used for Caesar's Palace from the Flamingo.
Right.
Was able to parlay that in 1967 for the International. And trust me, folks, it's all...
AKA the White House from the James Bond movie.
Oh,
because people will hear International and say, what's the International? Because it hadn't been that for a long time. It became the Vegas Hilton. But... it's
a good point. But and this all interacts, folks, trust me. But the International had, I think, two big acts, right, that really put it on the map and had people coming out for it. One, Barbra Streisand. Again, this is back in 1967.
But she wasn't there regularly. But the big person, of course, was Elvis. They built the world's first Las Vegas showroom with a balcony there because they needed the extra seating to see Elvis. So
huge.
Let me just drop. There was a question that ran past. What was it? The contract player, Amnuk. The last I heard was, It might have been Lindsay Wagner, but the last I heard was Burt Reynolds. So, who got fired because he picked a fight with Darren McGavin on the set of Riverboat, and McGavin was the star. And so they told Burt he couldn't act and kicked him off the show and off the lot.
Oh.
But yeah, it was a show called Riverboat. But they had the Riverboat left over from Showboat, the movie, sitting there in this little pond near Five Points on the lot. And they made a whole show out of it for 2 seasons, I think. But the second season, no Burt Reynolds. I wonder why.
Yeah, I don't think he was too interested in coming back there. That's interesting.
No, they fired him. They kicked him out. Lock, stock, and barrel. Oops.
Whoops.
That would have been Lou's, too. So, anyway.
Oh, really?
Well, that period, yeah, that would have been, yeah. But, oh, well.
Well, there you go. So,
anyhow, so Krikorian bought it.
Very prolific. Go ahead.
Well, he was a character, but he was very, very singularly dedicated to making money. And allegedly, just before he bought the place, the people that were soon to be his lieutenants, until he got rid of them because he had to keep the people that were there, made this little deal that drove him crazy because he thought they got way too little for the deal. What was the deal? The deal was the partnership with Disney in the studio park, which remember originally was Disney MGM Studios.
Disney MGM Studios.
And remember also that before they actually did the whole theme park, they were going to do a mini sort of, I don't know what you might call it, a mall-size theme park, hotel, and merch project in downtown Burbank with a hotel with each room themed to a certain movie. They were going to have an MGM, Gone with the Wind suite and things like that. But then they decided, what the hell, let's do it for real in Florida. So.
Yeah. So this keeps occurring, by the way, of Kirk Kerkorian acquiring, parts of MGM specifically to leverage its assets, and then other studios being interested in the immense film library under the MGM banner, because they were extremely prolific back in the 20s to the 1950s, 60s, that kind of era.
Well, and it's not just that. Just because it's the MGM library or the Warner Brothers library doesn't mean that's who owns it. Those libraries got shuffled around a lot.
They did.
Ted Turner, in particular, wound up owning everything from pre-1950 at Warner Brothers and the MGM library. So, which was a large part of why he was able to make such a success of TBS Superstation, because the programming was free at that point. He owned all those movies. And if he owned them, not only could he exploit them on television, he could keep other people from exploiting them. So if you had Channel 58 in Podunk and you wanted more people to watch your channel because you were making money on local ads, and TBS came to you and said, hey, we'll make you the hottest independent non-Big Three network station in your region, because you'll get to show Gone with the Wind, and you'll get to show The Big Heat, and you'll get to show Casablanca, because we own all those movies, and we'll not only license them to you in return for every 6-8 minutes of commercials in an hour, we get 2 and you get 4, and we can sell them nationally and make more money on our 2 than you'll make on the 4 locally. And everybody works out. We'll keep them off any station within X number of miles of you. You'll be the only one.
Right.
And that's how he made his money.
Man, wild. So Turner acquires some of the film, or the library of films.
Yeah.
I believe in 1985, and then even before then, MGM purchased United Artists and their library of film. I think it was back in 1981. So you've got so many things changing hands, and then well, in 1989, that's when MGM Studios opens, and Walt Disney World in Florida, leveraging some of that library as well. Some rights they had, some rights they didn't. I remember there's this famous story of Frank Wells, in which they didn't have the rights to, I believe, the likeness to some of those audio-animatronic figures featured in the Great Movie Ride, specifically Clint Eastwood. And so, apparently, how they were able to convince Clint was they actually built the audio-animatronic figure completely, but they just put a bag over his head right there, because they didn't have the likeness yet. Invited Clint out, and then as soon as Clint and Frank Wells round the bend in which you see Clint Eastwood's figure, they take the bag out. It's like, hey, look, you have your figure here, and he's like, oh, that's so cool. And it's like, hey, here's a rights contract. let us show this to others, and that's kind of how they sealed that deal there.
Yeah.
Just a really interesting time. But yeah, Kirk was none too thrilled about that. He had purchased his stake, I think the largest stake in MGM. I think that's going back to 1969, just 2 years after the International opens. So that's kind of how he leveraged his own money to do that. And then I think liquidated a bunch of assets that MGM had at that time. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. And when they built their own, when they built the MGM hotel, the first one, it was the height of that whole Hollywood nostalgia craze that was going on anyway.
Right.
Where everybody in the suburbs was decorating their house in Art Deco, and home movie theaters were starting to happen with VHS. And when you went to the MGM in those days, the first one, the big stage show, the big Foley Bergère style, extravaganza was called Hallelujah Hollywood, and was all about Hollywood movies, and had there it was. That's the original, with that pyramid in front, which is the flies of that stage. That big hump is the backstage area of the Hallelujah Hollywood stage, and then downstairs in the lower level, where all the shops were, and where they had a movie theater, which was Vegas didn't have movie theaters in casinos ever. In those days. Now they're all over the place, but they didn't have them because they didn't want you not gambling for 2.5 hours. But they had one, but the hallway leading to it. In the old days, pictures have got to be around somewhere, but I know it's on the fly to go search, but that's what you do on this show so wonderfully all the time when something like this comes up. In the makeup department of MGM and all the major studios, they had what was called a life mask. Which was the star lay there with a couple of straws in his nostrils while they piled plaster of Paris on his face and took a mold of their actual face. And in fact, you've probably got the one of, what's his name? Blaine Gibson sculpting Lincoln, where he used the original Lincoln life mask.
Yep.
But anyway, the reason why the studios had those, they basically had an absolutely accurate 3D impression of the face of the star, was, well, let's say they're going to give him a different nose for this movie. Does the star have time to go in there and lay in the makeup department for hours and get different noses tried on? No. So they would do it on the mask, do it on the life mask, which they knew was perfect to the real person. These are pictures. This is Blaine Gibson, who was the #1 sculptor at Disney all those years.
So
and there happened to actually be a life mask of Abe Lincoln, and that's it. And they got a copy of it for him to make great moments with Mr. Lincoln. So
good.
But anyway, they had all those masks, just like that Lincoln one, but of all the stars, each in their own little glass case with perfect lighting in this dark, long hallway under the hotel. I mean, I was known to spend hours just contemplating how accurate and good they were, and how you got to sort of get the real sense of what they looked like when they weren't on stage, because that was their actual day-to-day face. Yes, MGM went bankrupt, but they auctioned off the backlots and stuff long before that. Actually, that was part of Kirk's.
Because when Kirk comes in, Kirk Kirk is like, I'm going to make my money back on this investment, and
the idea being that the sum of the parts are greater than the whole.
right.
It would be like, I don't know, if you bought the Dodgers and you sold off the farm team but kept the main team, or if you, as most people know, McDonald's became fabulously successful, partly from hamburgers, but partly from real estate, because they own the land in all those key retail corners to put the burger stands on. So,
which is you can we like to play clips of the founder, right?
Somewhere I've got the catalogs from those auctions that MGM had, and
really,
it's
because I'd like to see those, because apparently the ruby slippers from
if
Wizard
I knew
of
where
Oz,
I think Debbie Reynolds got the slippers because she was going to open a Hollywood museum. I know she got that fantastic curtain from Around the World in 80 Days. That was at the Carthay Circle originally.
Yep.
But where I saw it, God,
so cool.
I'm old, you know.
It's so cool. No, but it, obviously Kirk was very interested in more real estate development in Vegas. Used the MGM name in order to create the first MGM, now Bally's. Obviously, something very tragic happened in the 1980s involving that hotel, in which many people, unfortunately, lost their lives as part of a huge fire.
Yeah.
That incinerated that first version right there, and changed fire code entirely, especially when it came to commercial buildings like that. And then the second MGM hotel, a little bit further down the strip there, opens with a theme park and with the MGM name as well. And that's when it's between this time period where MGM Studios, MGM the resort hotel line, kind of branch off into their own
literally
divisions.
Become two separate companies,
right?
Because really, MGM at that point was surviving as a movie company more as a distributor than as a producer, and more because of their long-term distribution deals with, for example, the James Bond films.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So which they didn't produce either. They distributed them, but they didn't produce them.
Really? Did they hold the rights to them?
No. Well, they have distribution rights and video rights and that sort of thing.
I see.
I don't know who still does it. I don't think they do anymore, but they didn't put up the money. Saltzman and Broccoli did all of those independently. They made distribution deals to raise the money.
Sure.
But you see, that's the thing. One thing about MGM's stature in the business, whether earned or not, is that they had a huge international footprint beyond this country that the other studios didn't necessarily, or only had in partnership with other studios overseas.
Right.
So, because MGM was owned, of course, by Polygram for a while, and anyway, and then by Bronfman up in Canada, by the Seagram's heir, who also his son owned was the boss at Universal for a while, and then made the deal with Cineplex Odeon, and
it gets complicated, don't it?
Basically, if you want to understand corporate finance in history, you just have to watch a few episodes of Dallas or Dynasty or
oh man, well,
but see, that makes sense, because when you get to companies or assets that are that expensive, there's only a few people who have the stature and the money to play at the high roller table like that. So
right.
And for better or worse, it is a simple fact of life that people with that kind of money and desire and drive also have ego. And you don't invest in movies because you don't care about your ego. It just doesn't happen. That's all.
Well, and you were relaying a story from Ocean's 11 that just recently debuted on the channel from the Genre Guys here. that I guess there was a real estate development in which they were trying to make a high rollers only hotel in Vegas that was exclusive to people that you might see featured on a poster like that back in the day. But because people wanted to be seen, it wasn't really a.
Well,
It wasn't
that
really
was
something.
actually the first MGM. They put
Oh,
right in the middle of the huge casino floor, in its own little pit with its own little lighting, a
I
high
see.
rollers table,
Gotcha. Okay.
and it didn't do business because it was, or pardon me, they put one on a separate floor, and it
Hmm.
didn't do business. So when they moved it to the middle of the casino, it did, because those
Right.
people liked being seen to be the elite and to bring their girlfriend of the moment down into that pit with them,
Gotcha. Okay.
figuratively or literally. It reminds me of a great, and let me say Happy New Year to all of my brethren of the tribe. But there's a great story about the young Jewish stockbroker who's made his millions and is celebrating his success. And he takes mama and papa from the old country, who are proud of his success, of course, but he
Hmm.
bought himself a fancy yacht, a cabin cruiser. And
Okay.
so he's going to take them out on the boat out at Marina Del Rey in L.A. And he's gotten himself the white pants and the blue double-breasted yachting coat and the ascot and the little yachting cap. And as they're clearing the breakwater, and his mother and his wife are downstairs making sandwiches, up on the flying bridge with his father from the old country, and he looks at him with pride, with this beautiful boat and beautiful outfit, and he says, "So, Papa, so what do you think of your son now?" And he looks at him and he strikes a pose and he says, "Am I a captain or am I a captain?" And Papa looks at him. He says, "Son, by you mother, you are captain. And by me, you are captain. But by a captain, you're no captain." So it's all relative, and your relatives are your worst critics.
It is all relative. Um, to round out our history here, later on, Sony would purchase MGM, I believe, for $5 billion there,
Yeah.
round off more assets and so forth, and get rid of more stuff for themselves. And then eventually, 2010, yep, MGM would file for bankruptcy. And then later on, a small little company, just a small little thing, not a mom and pop store really. Amazon would then buy MGM for $8.45 billion in order to acquire the remaining rights of the MGM library, catalog, production studios, and everything
Well,
associated with
see,
that.
and what I said about prominent people and egos,
Hmm.
these Japanese companies and these large American industrial companies that bought into the studios in those days,
Yep.
they were buying, not legitimacy but prominence. Although for the
Right.
Japanese electronics companies, for Sony, and then for Matsushita, who bought Universal, um, it was also kind of market research, because they wanted to, as the world, they saw better than anybody how things were leaving film behind and going digital. And they thought, if we want to be the preeminent company in basically selling um, equipment to the studios, if we own one, we'll learn how best it works.
That's a fair
Uh,
point.
I was working at Universal when the Japanese bought in, and working with a wonderful star on a great show that shall remain nameless. But one day I get in there early on our stage, and I see these guys up in the flies of our stage. And I say our because you understand, for sitcoms, which is a lot of what I did, uh, that's your home base. All of your basic sets and the audience booth and everything is there all the time. And I see these guys running all kinds of wires up in the rafters and putting in cameras. And I asked them what they were doing. And they explained that because they wanted to learn about how shows are produced, they were putting in closed circuit to all these stages where these shows were done, up to the Black Tower, to an office where the Japanese electronics guys were going to watch and learn. Well,
Oh,
God bless them. Actors, good ones, are very protective of their process. And that's why most rehearsal stages are closed sets, because if you're rehearsing, you have to feel the freedom to fail. You have to have the freedom to experiment and make mistakes and kick it around a little before you settle on how you're going to do it for an audience.
it's a fair
And
point.
when our wonderful star showed up, I went over to him and said, "Listen, I just want you to know what's going on. This is what's happening, and this is why they told me they're doing it. I thought you'd want to know." And he was so grateful. And he said, "Lou," or whatever my name was. He said, "I tell you what," he says, "when everybody gets in and we're getting ready to start rehearsing, you tell them I'm in my dressing room, and you tell them that when the wire is gone, I'll be on stage ready to go, and not until. And thank you for letting me know." And he forced them to yank it all out to protect his fellow players, all of us, really. So there were some conflicts. The other funny thing that happened, they put in, all the studios have on the Backlot a studio store where if you work there, you can get things at a discount and basic stuff too,
Sure.
And that store, that Japanese electronics company store, when they took over, oh, I'll never forgive myself. They had the highest end, super fantastic keyboards, the ones that imitated every instrument in the orchestra times 12 with all kinds of great gimmicks. They had one in there that I had seen at retail for about a minimum of $5 or $6 grand, and I could have bought it for $1,200. But part of the deal was, A, you got to take it right there from the store, and B, you are not allowed, under penalty of all kinds of stuff, including getting fired, to tell anybody how little you paid for it, because the retail stores that they had partnership with, like Best Buy and all of those, would go nuts if people found out it was being sold that cheaply, because they could figure out their profit margin. So they had like a not to compete covenant with their retailers that said you absolutely can't give that information away. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah, and then, of course, I've told the story before, but it wasn't just them. Coca-Cola, all these big companies were buying into the studios to have some legitimacy, so that people wouldn't think they were just a bunch of fly-by-night cheating accounting movie people. Sure. And when the Directors Guild went on strike for 20 minutes, and I say that not joking, when we actually got to the moment, they knuckled because we were organized. Our president of the time, Gil Cates, gave a speech the night before the strike vote that was actually written by another great guy, Lionel Chetwynd. And he said what these major industrial corporations don't understand about how the movie business is different from their businesses is that in this business, the capital equipment goes home every night. It's not about the studios and the real estate and the buildings. It's about the people. So if you got the talent, you're set. Which is why you can make a movie like Easy Rider that I mentioned earlier with no studio and no sound stage and no nothing, a couple of guys, a couple of motorcycles and a camera, and make more money than Julie Andrews and Cute Kids and Singing in Austria. So anyway, where are we at? What's new?
No, we were just rounding off the MGM story there. It is interesting. You mentioned how some of these Japanese companies were getting involved in the Hollywood in order to figure out for market research. I would think that would happen at the the physical media side as well, to kind of know, like, okay, what does Hollywood really value? It might be why Blu-ray ended up winning out over HD DVD in the physical media.
Could be. There's the whole VHS versus Betamax history there too.
Oh yes.
Yep. But
probably in the wake of that is like, okay, we're gonna jump on this. we're not gonna have these.
There's really a precedent, and that's Panavision. Because anytime you see a movie that says Panavision, the studio doesn't own those cameras. They literally are rented to them by Panavision.
Right.
and the lenses. And when Panavision came out with their first digital cameras, and people said, well, gee, this is different because everybody's got digital. Yeah, but you haven't got their lenses. And so there's always been that proprietary thing. We mentioned on the genre guys last week when we were doing Robin Hood, how Technicolor was the same way, and how they literally every night when they finished shooting, put those cameras on a truck, raced them down to LA from the locations up in Chino, had them cleaned up, fixed up, whatever, and back on the set the next morning. So in fact, one year, I forget, I'm trying to think what show it was I was doing. On a sitcom, you've got 4 Panavision cameras. Now, understand, they didn't make them all. A lot of them are these old Mitchell BNCs that go back to, God, the 40s. But they were the ones that bought them all up and keep them. And, of course, they do the lenses. And we look up at the camera when the new season starts. Our camera guys all go out to Panavision and basically choose their guns, and that set becomes the set for your show for that season. And we look up at one of them, and up on the magazine, on the part where the film is, for those who don't speak camera, there's a plate with a list of movies, titles. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Wind and the Lion, a bunch of big budget Spielberg, David Lean movies.
Okay.
And what it was, the TV business in those days would kind of vacillate between a lot of sitcoms and a few hour-longs, or a lot of hour-longs and a few sitcoms, and we could talk about that sometime. But that season was one of the biggest years for multi-camera sitcoms. Well, think about it. If you've got 50 pictures, 50 shows, and they're mostly hour-long dramas, they've got a camera or maybe 2 once in a while. But if they're all carrying 4 at a time, you need a lot more boxes, right? Well, they ran out. And this thing that had all of these famous pictures on it, it turns out those pictures were all shot with that camera, and it had been retired because of that famous stuff. It was all the pictures that Dougie Slocum had made, and it had been sitting in a glass case in the waiting room lobby of Panavision's office in London when home base said, we're out of equipment, send it home. It's got to go back to work.
That's wild.
And here we are making a network sitcom with this movie, this camera that had been, well, it had a better vacation than any of us ever did. Let's put it that way. So that's the kind of crazy stuff that happens,
oh man, equipment. Oh my goodness gracious. How many great stories are there of directors damaging cameras to get certain shots and so forth?
Oh, well, not just that. I told you about that horror movie where they were using chocolate syrup because it was black and white as blood, and somebody set the pressure too high and sprayed the camera. So, well, when I was at film school, and they were teaching us, when you're making your student films and you want to do a little more lighting than the crappy old house your friend lent you to shoot the movie in can handle, they were teaching us how to climb up the electrical pole and hook into the transformers. Those big depth charge looking things on the poles in the back of your house.
Yeah.
But the one thing he said was, aside from the fact that it can kill you if you touch the wrong thing, because it's 80 zillion volts, if it blows up, which you will notice because it will do it loudly and visibly, pack your stuff and run, because if you don't get away before the DWP shows up, that's a $30,000 bill. And that was in the 70s, so but I mean, he literally taught us that. He says, be ready to run when you touch this terminal, because if it doesn't kill you, but it does blow up the pole, you're on the hook, baby. So
that's amazing. Oh man. Oh wow. That's a scrap of your time, I suppose. That's wild. By the way, stuttering guitarist, tell the wallet joke. Lou, you know what he's talking about?
I do. I don't know how it applies, but tell the wallet joke.
Well, you know,
The
we
wallet
can...
joke is a little iffy, Vash. I'll let you decide.
Oh.
But SG, I'd love to, but I'm worried we'll get YouTubed.
Yeah, we've already pushed the envelope there on the
I got in
there.
such trouble the other night on Marvin's show because somebody mentioned something and it had this, you know, me. If you watch these with me enough, you know it's the music of the language that appeals to me. And somebody said something that had the same cadence as "I'm tired of these blank blank snakes on this blank blank plane." Only I didn't blank blank it. And did they get concerned? Well, the wallet joke is not like that, but I don't know that it. If it applied to anything we were talking about anyway, I would. But I appreciate the appreciation, SG. But that's one I think I told him privately. If I didn't put it on it, I don't think it was on a live stream. I'll tell you afterwards. Ha 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 ha.
Oh,
hey, have I seen a single damn super chat today? Should we raffle off the joke?
Oh, raffle off the joke. that's an idea. That's something. I wonder if YouTube is messing with us again. I know on a 2-3PO live, actually, people weren't able to actually give super chats. So I'm not sure.
Well, shame on them.
Well, they weren't able to because YouTube. Yeah, shame on YouTube because YouTube didn't allow that feature to work because that's very.
I didn't mean it went on a vacation to the glass case. I meant all of the different shoots that it had been on. So anyway,
that's a crazy. What a crazy story! What a crazy event in which you're using this camera that's been used for so many film productions.
So the mum, do you know what a moil is?
No.
Well, a moil is a position within my church who is the circumcisionist.
Gotcha.
I hope not. But anyway,
no. I was just
and the moil is retiring after 50 years in the business, and he's cleaning out his office, and he's got this 55-gallon drum full of formaldehyde and the trimmings of his profession, and he's thinking, God, I don't know what the hell to do with it, but I kind of hate to just put it out for the trash. It's kind of a tribute to my work. So he grabs the barrel and he rolls it next door to Moshe, the tailor. And he says, listen, I have no idea but can you make anything? Come back Thursday. Okay. He comes back Thursday and he says, so, and Moshe reaches under the counter and slaps down on the counter a wallet. And the moil says, from that whole drum of all of those, all you made was this wallet? And he says, rub it a little. It turns into a set of luggage. But
Oh, man.
So there you go, SG. We got it. And thank you, the mum. It's your fault.
Thank you, the mum. Very much appreciate it.
What that's got to do with Lou and MGM and all that, even if it is New Year's. Happy New Year, everybody, by the way.
Well, it's New Year somewhere, right? Or as what is it? Pleasure Island would have it. New Year every night.
Oh yeah, that's right. Those were the days. I used to love to do that. God, I used to love to do that.
They were so good, Lou. So good. Stuff was so much better. But thank you so much. Yes, Josh Hammond, MGM with Lou and you. That's right. This is a story I wanted to catalog for a while now. I just think MGM's history is so fascinating because they were the number one at a certain point, and then just that slow decline over the last 80 years has been so profound.
They had the personalities when they were number one.
Yeah,
it's when they decided to become homogenated that they died. And that's true with a lot of these things. Question on cam. Okay, good. I'll look forward to it, Mom. Thank you. On cameras,
please.
It's funny.
And we should probably share the email itself there. T3P online at yahoo.com.
Oh, yes,
if you have
should.
any
Yes.
questions.
Here is everybody. Send in your questions. We'll give you the answers that you endorse. That Lou place? No. You don't understand, Josh. I do not even pretend to aspire to Johnny Carson status, but Johnny wouldn't have been Johnny without Ed. And if I'm going to pick anybody to handle my Clydesdales, it's going to be VashSky. So there you go.
Thank you so much for that vote of confidence.
I don't think that meant what I think it meant. Anyway.
Well,
the actual line was more stars than there are in heaven. Did you ever in the course of this find the famous photo of everybody from MGM all standing there in front of the curtain when they did the more stars?
More stars than there are in heaven. Let me see.
They got them all together for a lunch. I know you were, Josh. But and then I saw the recreation of it when That's Entertainment came out. They did it again at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. I was there for that premiere. Oh boy, that was one of the great experiences for me. And you're going to think, with all those famous people, well, I dealt with famous people a lot in my life, but with people from the bygone era that I never thought I would meet and whose talent was so undeniably fantastic. That night at that premiere in Beverly Hills of That's Entertainment, I got about 20 minutes sitting down chatting with the Nicholas brothers. And oh man, those guys. Yeah, that's the famous original. And see how many you can identify. But then they did the redo at the premiere. That's Entertainment with everybody who was still left. Anyway.
I have it right here, actually. Give me a second. Put it up on screen for you.
Steamer Sharks. I don't know.
Is that the original? Seems like the original to me.
There's the original. Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
And you'll see Jimmy Stewart in his Air Force uniform. And
Lucille Ball there. The
Yep. No, that's Lucille Ball over on the left, third from the left. And Greer Garson and Van Halen. And I'm just at random, picking out faces, but that was a crowd. That was some
incredible.
Talent.
Incredible.
Real talent. Doug Fairbanks Sr., no kidding. And
just really something.
Eddie Lamar. How many can you name? Rock Hudson.
I mean, they were like Amnuk said right there. MGM, more stars than in heaven, definitely for sure. But when the contracts changed, right, per picture deals, when that distribution model changed, when Kirk came in, all those things really affected this studio in profound ways and took it from its heights that it experienced in the early 20th century.
Well, different world, different economics, different
sure
lifestyle. I mean, when we talk about how many movies they were making, when MGM was making basically one every 9 days came out.
It's wild.
You had people going to see them for 50 cents, $1, 2 or 3 times a week sometimes, because there was no TV. There was no streaming. There was radio, but so it's a different world. It's a different world. Some ways better, some ways not. For most people, almost everybody, you are healthier now and you are better compensated for your labor and, lots of other good things like that. Mm-hmm. For most people, you are probably not as grounded in your country or your culture's history or your traditions, or so that part is sad.
More redheads back then, by the way.
Yes,
At
well,
least.
we tend not to intermingle for some reason, speaking as well. But
Well, speaking of oh, I don't know, interesting worlds to be transported in via the movies, you've got a show out there called The Genre Guys. Now, as I have put up before, Genre Guys, the Ocean's 11 episode has just made its way onto T3 PO, or that pod place here on the channel. So give it a subscribe if you want to go ahead and see that. Very, very good stuff. It's an excellent show there by Hangry and Lauren and Lou, of course. But you've got a show that just premiered over there on WW Pro's channel, exclusive to members only, Genre Guys. What movie was that?
The one that just premiered would have been Robin Hood.
Robin Hood. And very interesting thing about Robin Hood is that, Lauren, for the first time that I've ever seen him on the Genre Guys do this, is actually in costume for that production.
Yeah. He didn't tell us he was going to do it. He just suddenly shows up with the green jerkin and the Robin Hood hat, and it was quite special. You'll need to watch that, everyone. And then the one we did last night of a movie that sucks. Which one of our members asked for. So we don't always do classics. Some of them are curiosities. And the movie in question that we did last night was Police Academy. Let me try a poll here. How many people know how many Police Academy movies were made? The original and all the sequels. Steve Guttenberg and screw-ups wanting to be cops and all of that.
I want to say that was a bunch of films, but I don't remember how many.
Well, see, now the mum just said 4, and that's what I guessed until we investigated. Would you believe, Vash, over a period of 10 years, they made 7 of those things, plus a cartoon series?
Why?
7! Why is exactly the question. And that's what we were trying to figure out. Because the first one, it ain't so good. In fact, I said the jokes were okay for basically a slapstick pastiche kind of show, but the performances were okay. But everything was just okay. And everything was so repetitive and so obvious. There was never a joke where a punchline surprised you. Every time it was, oh yeah, it's that joke recycled. Because if you think about it, the movie is basically the same movie as every Misfits join the army and go through basic training movie. And so it's all the same jokes. And I thought, well, golly, when did it come out? 1984. And I thought, well, when we did our also, has it been on here? I think it has, of The Sting. One of the interesting things about The Sting was that when they re-released it a couple of years after it first came out, the tagline was, remember that movie that in spite of the world being nuts made you feel good when you came out? Well, it's back, because that was the oil crisis and war and terrorism and everything, and made you feel good. And I thought, well, what happened in 1984 that this lame-o comedy would work? Nothing is the answer. And then I thought, what was there in the economy that would make this work? Nothing was the answer. Was it, Lauren postulates that, it's a date night movie. Yeah, but it came out in February, not in summertime. And it's like, it should have been a drive-in movie in July, and instead it was not in March. So I don't know. I have no clue. It is a mystery to me, and I'm supposed to be an expert, how the hell that ever generated 7 movies. But it did. If you'd like to hear us stumble around trying to figure that out, you'll have to wait a few months to see it. But it'll be on the Pro channel if you're a member there this week sometime. So there is that.
That is incredible.
But the Robin Hood one is really, really wonderful. And the one you just showed us is spectacular, I think. But then I'm prejudiced. You watch and tell me.
Yeah, I've got interesting feelings about the original Ocean's 11. I so like the remake because that's kind of the one I grew up with. So when I saw the original, I was like, okay.
Well, of course, different Vegases altogether. Vegas is so
very different Vegases, yes.
But see, my standard statement is that this movie with Frank and Dean and Sammy and Peter and these guys are cool. Clooney and the rest are playing cool.
I would agree with that.
It's just not the same, you know. But
they
made this movie. They made this movie while they were performing every night for 2 or 3 hours, drunk 24/7. I guarantee you, and it's great. So, but part of that, you know, I've thought about it some more.
Mm-hmm.
Frank didn't do take 2.
He did not.
He just did not. So it had to be good the first time, and they all knew it. If it had been Frank and a bunch of other people, not the Rat Pack, it might not have ever been any good because he might have just gotten bored, taken the money and run. He didn't care. So anyway.
Yeah, I do agree with that. One of the best, I don't know, scenes from that film though is that long shot of them walking away, you know,
at the end. Yes.
The end, and you see them on the marquee. It's like, oh, it's perfect.
But it wouldn't be without Sammy singing that song about I once had dun, 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 with that minimal arrangement with the bass. Yo, 11. You know, I mean, God, great stuff.
That ending gets me every time. It's just like so much hype, so much buildup, and then to that.
Yeah, well, of course, in those days, you couldn't let the guys get away with crime.
Sure.
Because even if they were good guys to you as movie actors, they were bad guys to the world. I think I've told the story. Roy Huggins, who wrote The Fugitive, and tried to pitch it to the networks back in the 60s, and had almost, obviously not all of them because it got on the air, but everybody not only turned him down, they were angry. How dare he suggest that in America's wonderful jurisprudence system, somebody who was innocent would get convicted of murder. You evil, dissident criminal, you, for even suggesting it. So anyway.
What a different time. what a different time. And it definitely evokes the era, that's for sure. So Ocean's 11 right there, guys. A little more of that,
a little less of what we got would be a good thing, but that's just me.
Definitely some good stuff
Aunt
there.
Jemima,
also,
it did. Nerds did, but not 7. And a cartoon.
Yeah, there's not that many. Which is crazy.
I was sure. Okay, I was sure it was 4 when but no, it was a lot more than that. So
wow.
Anyway,
absolutely incredible.
Well, so that's what's genre guying lately. And next week we're going to record. For the second time, Hangry cannot be with us. And therefore, our special guest host, Marvin the Movie Monster, is going to join us again. And since we were trying to think of a kind of a theme for him, and since our first one with him a couple of weeks ago was the original Superman movie, you know, the Christopher Reeve movie, we thought we should do the first in a franchise, first in a series, first with a new character movies for him. And we're going to do the original Rocky. So that ought to be fun.
That would be really fun. That'll be great.
So you see, we don't, we go all over the map on the show, but we try to pick pictures that have some worth, have some reason, and that would probably be worth y'all buying on disc, because the way they mess with the old ones when they just stream them, either restricting them or editing them or putting in these trigger warnings. Give me a break.
Get your Blu-rays and 4K copies now, folks. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's going to be great. I got to come on the Genre Guys one day and join you guys.
Yes, you have to. In fact, I got us. Hey, everybody out there, you're hearing it here first. We were talking and we were realizing that for several weeks now There have been times when we have scheduled to shoot it, tape it, and something's come up. Either one of us got sick or somebody had to take a trip and we had to put it off for a couple of days. And therefore, I have been lobbying the genre guys that we need to have a show in the can waiting for times when, for whatever reason, we just can't make it. Because we don't want to let a week go by without one because, hey, the show must go on. So I said, well, why don't we make a special guest hosting gig for you to be that show? And that leaves the question, those of you out there, I'm going to qualify this. You have to have actually watched an episode or two of the Genre Guys on either channel and have a sense of how it works. And then please pick a movie you'd like to see Vash host with Lauren and I to do with it. And then we will put it away and nobody will know it's there. And suddenly one week it'll pop out and spring live to your consciousness. So if you have an idea for that, you have the email address. Give it to
Absolutely. You have the comment section on this video, and you have the chat to deliver to us live. That's a great idea, Lou. I love that. I like that, and it would be my honor, my privilege to host.
We would love
the
to have
Guys for you.
And I'm not. No, what he did was tell them they couldn't have it if they didn't let him do it. So, kind of the same sort of thing. But no, that was
the same thing.
What's his name? The producer, Winkler. Anyway, no, he didn't self-finance it. But they didn't have today's inexpensive equipment and production requirements. So, all right, so there you go. That's our project for all of you. See, this is the show that not only sends you home with anecdotes and nonsense, but you get homework. So
this is great. This is why I love Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on today's program right here. If you like the show, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Definitely helps us out for sure. Turn those notifications on so that you know when we ever go live, both for Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you, but also to T3PO live. That's going to be on Tuesdays at 2:30 Eastern. That's changing pretty soon right here. We'll get an updated schedule for y'all as soon as we receive it. Probably be in the community notes tab again. Also, too, a reason why you should subscribe in order to get updates on that programming as well. Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you is staying at its 2 p.m. Slot there on Sundays, so no problems there. Also, too, new content on the show daily. I think that's just about everything there. Lou, you were able to plug the Genre Guys and everything that you got going on, so I think that just about wraps us up. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and have a wonderful, magical day. We'll see you at the movies, probably.
Adios.
Adios.